Good afternoon, everyone. Nazarene Ibrahim here from Socially Acceptable. We are a social tech enterprise committed to responsible digital citizenry. Now, what does that mean? We'll talk about it in upcoming episodes because today I'm very excited to bring back our weekly interviews. We had stopped in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The last time we had an interview was with Prof. Tilitsi Marwala, UJ's Vice Chancellor, and I don't know if he is outgoing right now, but I know he's released a book recently, which I saw on LinkedIn some news about yesterday. But enough about that for now. What we aim to do with our flagship report at Socially Acceptable is to bring you some of the best thought leaders, thinkers, and researchers on the African continent around artificial intelligence and the subject of ethics. Today, I'm very excited that we get a chance to speak to someone based here in Johannesburg, South Africa, about the work that they're committed to doing to impact change, tech for good. Lavina Ramkissoon is passionate about humanity, technology, economics, and dance. So besides the 20 years experience in tech, she holds added knowledge in fields of both psychology and artificial intelligence. Lavina has a very extensive portfolio in the years that she's been doing this particular type of work, and they include agri-tech, fintech, health tech, law tech, retail tech, and it is growing. She plays in the sunny fields across Africa's landscape. She has a passion for education, inspiration, and innovations within Africa, applied AI ethics mentorship programs, and raising awareness of AI policy, adoption, and liquid upskilling within the African continent. She's also the founder of Tuti AI. So I can't think of a better person to speak to about being on the ground and doing this type of work, and I'd love to bring her into studio. Lavina, welcome to AI Africa Report.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Naz. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so pleased that you accepted our invitation to join today. And I would also like to say that you are the first woman that we are profiling on AI Africa Report, because I had noticed in our conversations that we had, I struggled slightly to find, and I would only find candidates who are male, and we would end up as a consequence interviewing them, of course, to have content. But I became very worried that we had lack of female representation, which is what our conversation should be about today. So thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. And I brought a little friend along, and that's Bud.
Bud is a rather cute mascot for the rest of our presentation. I'm sure he will give us a few words at the end or whenever it feels the need to. But I'm excited you're joining us today, and it's of significance that being the first woman that we're interviewing on AI Africa Report, which is also, I think, in part a fault of ours, because we should have been better at looking for candidates or working in the AI space. I would like you maybe to kick off the conversation for our viewers by speaking about what prompted you to start Tuti AI.
Yeah, I think that's a good foundation to start at. And for me, I think the driving force has been around our history, our heritage, the kind of dynamics that we grew up with within SA in particular. And, that for me was enough of diversion and diversity and heritage in there to sort of prompt me to worry about how those things will affect us when we develop technology, whether it be in an AI space, whether it just be in hardware, whether it be on the software end. But it was more just to create consciousness and to make something more tangible at the end of the day. So, everyone talks about tech for good and the rest of it, but very rarely do we actually see it implemented. And I think that was my driving force for it. I think we've lost Naz for a little bit. I'm sure she'll be back. So just to keep the conversation going, in terms of the diversity within South Africa and our particular uniqueness that we have, we need to pay more attention to things like cultural AI and to see how it can realistically impact our society in terms of what is the real tangibleness of us implementing something in the medical sector, for example, and what effect would it have on our GDP? What effect would it have at the end of the day for employment? Something that's way more tangible. And I think Naz is back. Hi, Naz.
Hello, thank you for continuing that. As we must have internet connectivity issues to add to the flavor of every interview, we did. So thank you for continuing speaking there. I imagine, having missed what you said, that you were speaking about the inspiration that prompted you to start 2T AI. So forgive me for missing the last bit, but if you continue in that stream, we can pick up our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to recap, I think for me, given our history and our background growing up in South Africa, it just really prompted me to create something that's tangible within the tech space. You know, something that someone can see that is actually adding value and not being feared. And for me, that consciousness was the driving force.
Well, I'm sure you explained this already, and I may have missed it for the benefit of the viewers. Please tell us in a short elevator pitch what 2T AI does and what the kind of tech you work with.
Okay, yeah, sure. So in essence, I think we run across all different streams. We don't like to specialize, and that probably stems from me as an individual. I love all aspects of things, and I love learning. So in particular, we would go into an industry, we'd look at different aspects of it, whether it's the strategy end of it, whether it's the ethical end of it, whether it's the frameworks, and we'd look at what is the best use case in implementing a particular technology to that industry. So, and that doesn't stop just there. I mean, we would look at things like data and data analytics and, you know, what's the greater good. So, you know, as much as we want to segment things, we want to look at it more of an overall picture where we take into account the software, the hardware, the data, the people, the technology, you know, that entire framework that actually supports the ecosystem. Yeah.
How long is 2T AI running for now?
Okay, so we kind of came around when AI was a thing, but not a trend. So if that gives you any context, so we've been around for about 4.5 years. And the kind of projects.
Please go on.
Yeah, no. So the kind of projects that that we've been involved in is sort of the more good feel kind of projects, right? So one that sort of really resonates with me a lot is with the sort of mum project that we had, right? It's called Mum Project because we literally monitored pregnant moms over a period of their entire pregnancy plus 3 months post their pregnancy. And the aim of that was purely because we have a scenario in South Africa where we have one nurse to 250 patients at the end of the day. And that's the current stats that they sit with. So it's almost an over inundation to the nurse to actually monitor them, to actually give them a bit of credibility. So we had partnered with people that used blockchain together with ourselves on the AI front and IoT devices to then encompass that entire program. And so that's a kind of good feel kind of project.
Before we talk, I love that you mentioned that particular project because it's a lot with around the key focus areas that we, I think, as responsible tech communicators and workers in the field are moving towards, which is the social impact of technology and articulating it so that it's becomes better for the general public to understand. I think we're at the place where we are all working together to do that, which is why I love that you explain about the social project that you were involved in with a number of different collaborative partners. Before we move on, talking about the general public's understanding of data, would you say that the general public and people who have the right to vote, so every person in this country who has the right to vote, understand what AI means, how it impacts their lives? Do you think from your perspective that people have a good understanding?
I think they have an understanding, not necessarily the full context of it. So, you know, working a lot within the space, you find people have very set views of what AI can do or what AI actually is. And, rightly so, wrongly so, it is the case. But I think education in terms of what the true potential of it is key in terms of, understanding the industries, understanding what is the total capability, what are we actually dealing with. I mean, all of us at the moment work with segments of things, right? And we understand things in a particular stream. So, it's more about now creating that broader picture, so then we can then understand and better control AI, for a lack of better words, control.
Controlling AI is, I think, key to our work for the next couple of years in terms of the way it outputs for good. And part of that, a major part, a component of that idea is the data. Do you believe, Lavina, from your work and perspective right now in the field, that the general public needs to start getting a better grasp of how their data is used to train and teach AI-powered systems? And how do you think they should do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's key. It's fundamental. Because if we continue to, be in something that we don't understand, it becomes highly flawed. It becomes almost at the point where you're giving it advantage, and we don't want that, right? Just yet, because we don't understand AI in its full entity. So, as much as we don't understand AI in its full entity, let's be really honest, we don't understand the human brain in its full entity either. So, given that sort of scenario, given the pace that technology is moving really fast, it's imperative that we keep par. And how can we practically do this? I think understanding your rights, knowing what they are, educating, talking to family, friends is absolutely key. Talking to salespeople that actually call you and say, by the way, this is actually against POPI or GDPR. Can you please remove me from your database? Being that conscious and that aware on your day-to-day life, where it's actually just a normal conversation that you have with someone. And I also find that culturally, we're afraid to say no to people. So we would entertain the conversation from a salesperson or from an insurance company, but then, sort of not feel really happy about the end result of it. And then another example could be, the use of your email addresses. So, instead of using one particular email address, whether it be your Facebook account or Gmail account, throughout everything and signing on with one, rather go and create different usernames and passwords. I know it's a pain, but in the long run, it's empowering you as an end consumer. And I think, your data is your power. You are the power, and you have the right to actually change large tech giant companies together with governments in terms of insisting to them, what your services, what your end products are actually going to look like.
This conversation we're having is also a real reflection of a documentary I watched very, very recently, as in 2 days ago, called The Coded Bias by Shalini Kazaya, which showed MIT researcher Joy Boal-Lamwini talking about exactly the ideas that we have around who we are in the process of using these services from large tech corporations, but the output that we have because of the nature of culture, race, and gender. So the things you are talking about are, I suppose, we will have further conversation and continue to have them in order to entrench it in the minds of people so that there can be an active change around it. So I would love to continue that conversation at another time and go in depth with it on you. What I want to explore at this point is from looking at the playing field, and you are, I am pleased to say, and why I get a chance to talk to you today is because you're a mentor on a program that I'm a mentee on as well.
Yes.
This program by Lighthouse Consulting, in I think they're based in San Fran or California, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
That's how we actually got a chance to meet. And understanding that and looking at the landscape right now, what would you say are the factors that are affecting the rapid deployment and development of AI in the continent?
Yeah, so I also find it very interesting, just to your initial point, that we had to go around the entire world to meet each other, being in the same country. So, but I'm glad that I did. So, absolutely, rapid AI, in terms of its entity, I think there's a few gaps that we lack, and they're quite evident gaps. One being, the government transparency and adoption in terms of AI frameworks, ethics, policies, around how we actually handle things and the fastness of how we actually adopt frameworks, policies, and structures. And together with corporates need to also include a lot more diversity. They need to include a lot more policies. They need to be able to include education and skills training. Together with universities. Universities is another area where I feel is huge potential. Creating supportive structures for this entire ecosystem. So, for example, having ethical research centers up and running, having funding, having grants, those things are key and fundamental to actually understanding what best suits South Africa and to what degree. And I think it can be even broadly implemented to Africa as a continent. So, for an example, if we had to say we want to implement a particular, medical technology within SA, what is the actual real value to the end consumer? What is the actual effect on the GDP growth? What is the actual effect on employment? What is the actual end result for us as a total? And I think those views kind of really lack.
The areas that you're talking about right now are key areas for research and development in order for us to understand and articulate an AI ethics framework around which to then talk as a talking point between government for regulation and the private sector for innovation. Those are key research areas, which of course the research has to be done there. I read an article yesterday quoting an Oxford professor at the Oxford now newly established Center for Ethics, saying that it's problematic to get funding from large tech corporations for AI ethics research because of certain reasons. And those reasons being that, of course, the agenda of the corporation is likely to outweigh or overtake the actual research objectives. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so again, I find this an interesting area. I think it's a combined effort. I don't think it's, an approach that we should have where it is he's blamed or she's blamed. I think, that collaboration between the government, between corporate, between individuals, between startups, between universities, just the general population at large needs to happen. It's super imperative. And if we don't get that right, if we don't get those foundation blocks, then I think, unfortunately, we're going to be in a situation where we don't take Africa as that leapfrog effect that everybody knows us to have, that potential. Things like, women inclusion and diversity in that is something that has been on the cards. And I think I echo the words from the chairwoman from the 4IR, where, she's of late called for more women inclusion in AI on boards. So, I think, every individual can have some impact, whether it be you as a normal citizen, whether it be you as a corporate. I think there's consciousness that needs to be applied. So, anything that you do, whether it's conscious thinking, whether it's conscious design, whether it's conscious innovation, I think those are fundamental to keeping that ecosystem alive.
Keeping an ecosystem alive in this context and at this moment is focusing around the impact, which is tied to ethics. And we've mentioned it a few times in the conversation, but I always ask every guest we get on, what does AI ethics mean to you?
Yeah, so, I think I always start off answering this question by going back to what ethics mean. And I think ethics in itself is just a normal moral compass that we all have, right? It's the moral principles by which navigates us through life. As I started developing a little bit more interest and knowledge into AI itself, I again realized that it's a lot to do with the conscious vision, the conscious creation, the conscious thinking, the conscious design about everything that we do, having that at the forefront, because we may not be as evolved as our moral principles just yet, as ethics as a whole. But however, AI, we need to start off with a mindset. And I think that's fundamental. If you can, at the end of the day, inspire people to just have that at their forefront, that in itself is a revolutionary change.
Do you think that the current developments that are happening in the EU as well as the US around creating AI ethics guidelines to incorporate in the conversations with global tech corporations. Do you think that those are a good starting point for us on the African continent? Because I am of the belief that because not only of the belief, because there is evidence to prove this, and we are all living proofs of concept in a way, is that our culture, the cultural and ethnic difference that we bring to the process of understanding and articulating morality, ethics, religion, truth, those type of things, including family systems and a whole host of other things that make us societies and communities. Do you think that we can use the guidelines from the EU side as a starting point, and how do we then apply our own lens alongside that?
Absolutely. I love this question because it's an area that I think I'm a bit passionate about.
Yeah.
And, absolutely. I think, as much as we have the likes of Asia, of EU, of Americas, doing their bit, which is great. And the more research we can get into it, the more understandings, the more lessons we've learned, great. However, I think that we need to almost take a pause. We need to take a pause and understand our diversity as its totality. I mean, South Africa in itself has such a broad diversity in terms of, our upbringings, our cultures, our different languages we speak. And that in itself is tenfold. And then to, add it to the Africa sector, it just gets compounded even more. So, absolutely, cultural AI is one of my new sort of initiatives that I'm learning about and sort of gaining a lot more understanding in. And it's imperative. It's absolutely imperative because it drives what actually will be used for the betterment for us at the end of the day. And I mean, if we just ignore things and put a copy paste scenario, it's not something that's going to work very well.
Sorry, I'm typing and I don't want to have the clackety clack of the keyboard. So I paused myself there for a moment. I think
no worry.
What we're talking about with having our frame of reference in not only understanding the difference that we present as the continent in order to create our own guidelines, but another thing that you are pointing to is, and a comment that Prof. Tilitsi Marwala made in our interview we had recently was around having our own data sets. Is that something that you've been thinking about, and what are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is like an amazing sector because we almost have a time or a platform to create whatever we want, however we want it. And not many countries get that opportunity to do it. So, agreed. I think there are lots of up and coming startups within the space of creating particular data sets or with creating particular niches. Some even going to the point of, going and creating entities as large as tech companies, as a large tech giants, but specifically for SA. And I think that in itself is amazing and it's fundamental. Again, I think it will talk to and address those cultural AI issues that are needed to be had within the African continent or within South Africa itself. So absolutely, I think the more that we can productize is kind of a bad word, but but the more that we can actually start applying it, the more we can actually start applying it to the South African context, the better it becomes. Because then I think the clearer the vision for what AI can do and what AI's true value to South Africa could possibly be.
If in the South African context, do you think, I mean, we're coming to the nearly to the end of our conversation, which is short, but I'm glad we started, do you think that we have enough or the correct measure of collaborative effort in order to drive this change in the country? Do you feel that that's happening?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's a twofold kind of question. So in some regards, yes, it's happening, and there's pockets of it that's sort of happening. However, I think the true value is 90% of the population out there is not driving it, is not actually engaging. And that's the part that we need to address. that's the part that we need to really start driving. I mean, understanding how infrastructure is going to help us drive better AI, understanding, how do we get, for example, robotics and AI and blockchain and IoT into the public sector education,
Yeah.
into the schooling environments. I mean, those are key fundamental questions that not a lot of these already well-developed countries have to ask, right? And as much as they may have some ideas to it, I think it's really more the local individuals, startups, companies that have had, experiences with things on a personal level that will drive change. I mean, I found that within the Africa sector, most of these innovations that have happened has been absolutely brilliant, but we don't hear about it. And it's always derived from the need to survive. So because they needed to survive, they
Yeah.
actually go to the nth degree to create something that is superb. And I think that we in exactly that kind of scenario.
As we wrap up such an amazing, vibrant conversation, very robust and exciting, and you're of course going to be back on AI Africa Report. I'm excited about that.
Thank you.
I would like to close by first asking you a message from you, from Tuti AI, to our digital citizens on how we go forward. And then would you please provide your contact details so people can get in touch with you?
Yes, sure. Well, thanks a lot. So I think, my sort of parting message would be that your power is your data. Your power needs to be your consciousness that you drive. You get to decide how you want to do something and to what degree. And I think that is my main message. The consciousness needs to be there in everything that you do. And absolutely feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, as well as the tuti.ai website. I'm more than happy to engage in these conversations. And thank you so much, Naz and AI Africa Report, for having me. And it wouldn't be fair if Bud didn't say goodbye.
But we come in peace. I'm trying to do the sign. I don't know what. No, okay, enough with the cultural references, especially filmy ones, which I will get totally wrong. So thank you, Lavina and Bud, for joining us today on AI Africa Report. As I say, today is a special conversation because you are our first into female, what could we say, thought leader from the field that we've had on the show, and an error on our part because we struggle to find female candidates to interview on the show. So I am really pleased. We will be getting Yashmita Bana, CEO of Nika Technology, on the show as well. So we'll be increasing the number of female intelligence leaders that are in the field. I really appreciate your time today, and please join us once again as we talk more AI ethics in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, brilliant. That was Lavina Ramkissoon talking to us from Tuti AI around AI ethics, as well as the work on the African continent. This is the job we have at hand, and this is our job at Socially Acceptable. We are responsible and committed to building a responsible digital citizenry. And what does that mean? That means that we are on the drive to educating all people, all publics, whether you come from general public, corporations, private sector, public sector, civil society organizations, school kids, everyone around what tech means in our lives, as we are the product. And the currency we produce is the data, which is used to inform the systems. Whether they work for us or against us is a daily conversation. So when we come back next week, we'll be talking to yet another amazing individual, and hopefully it will be Yashmita Bana, as we announced. We'll be on the move, so that's going to be great. But as always, tune in and connect with us on AI Africa Report. Email me, naz@sociallyacceptable.co.za, if you want to be featured on the show as well. Until next week, for AI Africa Report, I am Nazreen Ibrahim. See you next time.